In FIDIC, we're looking at clause 19. Very briefly, clause 19 is defined as force majeure is defined in clause 19 of the Red Book as an exceptional event or circumstances which is beyond a party's control, that could not reasonably have been provided against before entering into the contract, that could not reasonably have been avoided or overcome, and which is not substantially attributable to either party. It goes on to give some examples of force majeure events, and it doesn't talk about pandemics, but it does talk about natural catastrophes, which could cover our current situation. Very briefly, what are the consequences? The consequences under FIDIC are the performance is excused, that has been affected for as long as the force majeure event endures. It's possible to give rise to an extension of time and even possibly to terminate the contract. But look, it's difficult to terminate for force majeure under FIDIC because the test is a high threshold. It's that substantially all of the works are impossible to complete.
The pandemic obviously is something nobody expected a few months ago, and it's thrown a spanner in the works, so to speak, for a number of our clients. We've received a number of inquiries as to what kind of avenues of redress they can obtain. And I think the impact of COVID is obviously different depending on the stage at which you find your construction project. So for example, in a project I'm working on in Saudi Arabia at the moment, the clients have signed the contract, we're trying to get to financial close, but unfortunately with Corona, it's impacted and it's delayed that process to achieve financial close. So the consequences there are slightly different. Obviously, if your project is already in the construction phase, the impact would be different. It would probably impact completion. It could have impact in terms of delays in supplies and increased costs. And if your project's in an operational phase, then the impacts could be different as well. But generally speaking, the sort of relief that's been sought is around extension of time claims and increased cost claims, although in some cases also there are rights to suspend depending on what the contract says, and for prolonged issues, then a right to terminate as well.
I mean, fundamentally, it comes back to health and safety. And you, as the contractor or subcontractor, have a legal responsibility for the safety and security of site, but also the safety and security of your personnel. And again, COVID-19 does not somehow wish away that responsibility. You are still responsible to look after them, to maintain their safety and security. And it also impacts how effectively you carry out the works. And I think COVID-19 is obviously throwing up some incredible practical challenges, the social distancing probably being the most predominant one. I had a client who raised an issue with me recently where they are having to obviously ensure social distancing when transporting their workers to site. And that means they can carry a lot less workers in their buses and have to put on a lot more buses. And they wanted to know whether they can pass that additional cost up the chain. Now, obviously, it depended on the contract in part, but fundamentally, it wasn't just an immediate cost in terms of additional buses, but there was also a delay to the works, because before they were able to transport 6,000 people to site within an hour or so, and now they're struggling to get half as many to site as quickly. And they hadn't turned their attention to the impact from a time and cost perspective, and they hadn't notified the employer from a time and cost perspective. But what we're seeing is, and I think it's somewhat unique to our industry, is that we as an industry we live and breathe on keeping track of things. That's the whole purpose of construction. We have a beginning and we have an end, and in between we track, if we're doing it correctly, everything that happens. And so we're well placed as an industry, particularly using the FIDIC form, which is a good map for this. It's not the answer to everything, but it is a good structure for how to proceed. But we're well placed to document exactly the impact on things. And this goes back to the causation issue, because now is the time to turn our attention to causation. I think there was a period where we were getting used to what was happening, but now it's very much about documenting very clearly the impact of things. And it isn't just the immediate cost, it's the long-term impact on the project. I believe that, we're already beginning to see, and apologies, I didn't come back to your question with regards to Kuwait and Saudi, but we've got disputes and projects going on in both jurisdictions at the moment, and we're already beginning to see the effects of COVID in terms of how people price. I agree with Gurmeet. I think there's going to be, because we saw this in 2007 when there was the Asia financial crisis, and it caused loads of contractors from Asia to pile into the market, both here and in Africa. We saw a squeezing of the margins, and I think we're going to see that even further. Added to which, there's going to be a combination of both a number of contractors who collapsed during this period, along with parts of the industry, and there's going to be consolidation, and there's going to be perhaps less people chasing less work. So there will be, I think, a balance to that as well in terms of the industry. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more pragmatic approach to how contracts are executed. We've already instigated electronic signatures across a number of our clients' operations and advised them on the acceptance from a legal perspective of that form. I'd say most of the countries in the Middle East are actually quite open to executing contracts electronically. Many have already legislated on it. We're going to see the introduction of various new provisions in the contract. The savvy employers and developers amongst them are already beginning to do that. We've been helping them with the wording of that.